Ladies and gentlemen, the Proton Waja, an 11-year lifespan in Proton and Proton's first serious C-segment sedan developed in-house. You most probably remember the Waja in two phases. Number one, the first gen. Number two, the Waja CPS. However, in between these two phases, bridging the gap, was the Proton Waja CamPro facelift. The Proton Waja was an important model for Proton. Being the first in-house developed model, it kick-started a decade of R&D, where Proton successfully made some amazing cars to drive and at times hilariously failed at their own creations. This facelifted Waja was sold at the tail end of the Waja timeline, and as you can see, it came out for only 1 year just before the CPS model appeared. And especially in this pristine of a condition, it is an ideal candidate to be featured on Traction Talk. Proton, in collaboration with Lotus, had developed their own engines in the mid-2000s called the CamPro engine, and in the Waja facelift, you will find a 1.6-litre version of the engine powering this car. Power output is rated at 110 horsepower and 148 Newton meters. It has a high revving nature, meaning that you need to rev the engine in order to get the guts going. But in the Waja, with its 4-speed automatic transmission, proves to be quite a relaxing drive and has power in reserve when you floor it. So yeah, it's a two-natured experience which suits the use of the Waja very nicely, because for one, you will need to use it as a daily car. You would need a more docile experience, perhaps in traffic and also in daily life, sending your kids to and fro from school. But on the highway, travelling to your next business meeting ataupun balik kampung, you want to have a bit of fun, floor the pedal, and the CamPro does its job very nicely. The 2007 facelift brought major changes to the Waja's front fascia, notably in the form of its new grille, which now has thicker and bolder radiator slats, and of course this very thick chrome bar above. The light design has also been slightly revised with its matte interior, and also these three lines macam Adidas. If you remember, the first gen Waja had a shiny reflector style headlamp interior. It also changed the way the lower end of the front bumper looks, with now the signals and fog lights being clustered together. And the most notable thing would be the Proton logo in colour. This was Proton's logo back in year 2000 to year 2008. 8 years they've been using this logo. You might also remember it on the first gen Waja, the Gen 2 and the Savvy. The rear end follows design cues from the first Waja CamPro, the pre-facelift model. The tail lamps, perhaps the most discussed and controversial part of the facelift, because it came with this roundabout cul-de-sac thermometer crop circle design on a car which is supposed to be a more executive and family offering from Proton. So yeah, while it was grown up, matured, had a tie on, it still has its quirkiness from its youth and younger days. That was a very bizarre mix, but looking at it now, wow, what a story, what a personality, right? The Waja lettering is absent here. It originally came with the WAJA letterings, which on the first gen Waja was here. So they have moved it here for the facelift, and if you notice, this trend continues to current day Protons. Nowadays, you have PROTON emblazoned on the back of their cars. So it started all the way back in 2007 with this Waja facelift. And the final part would be this decal denoting the engine, CamPro 1.6E. Two things about this. Number one, what does E stand for in CamPro 1.6E? I've been searching for answers, tak jumpa-jumpa jawapannya. So kalau anda tahu apa maksud E dekat belakang tu, bolehlah komen kat bawah. Saya teringin nak tahu. Number two, people say that the CPS 1.6 rear emblem is very hard to find in 2024, but I dare you to find a new CamPro 1.6e emblem nowadays. Kalau dapat yang baru, tolong simpan. Jangan buang, jangan even pasang kat kereta, simpan je. Sebab sekarang ni barang ni dah terlalu rare, susah untuk dijumpai. While we are back here, why don't we just look at the boot, huh? It's a very huge space with 408 liters in storage capacity, true to its nature as a more executive and family-oriented car. So I would say the Proton Waja is a very good all-rounder with its nice design cues, comfortable interior, and also the abundance of boot space. Moving on to the side, the Proton Waja is an inoffensive and logical and even evergreen design, I must say. A 3-box sedan, first box, second box and third box, with very logical and sane looking wheels, nothing fancy, which adds to the quiet confidence that the Waja has. One thing which I would really love to see if Proton had fitted it in back day would be the inclusion of a Proton logo over here, which was present on the first gen Wajas, but they have subsequently removed it in the facelift models. But I think this is an easy fix. Beli je logo mana-mana, epoxy style, lekat saja. I miss this in Protons nowadays. If you remember the Proton Saga, the Proton Iswara had the Proton logo here, around where this signal is. But subsequently, Proton decided to not have the logo. Then it came back on the Waja, on this C-pillar part of the door. Then they removed it. So it was kind of an on and off relationship. But anyhow, the Waja facelift is a good looking car. And I must say that sporty bits such as this sharp and aerodynamic side mirror add to the sporty touch of this car. I have always had the opinion that the Proton Waja's interior was one of the best to be executed and designed by Proton. For starters, we have this very nice color combo going on in here. It starts off with a black top, separated by this metallic silverish grey metal finish right in the middle on the steering wheel and also above the glove box. Then it cascades down to a lighter brown and it ends with dark brown leather for the seats. The dark brown leather is also found on the door card and also on the same color scheme. Black, silver metallic thingy, light brown, dark brown. So it had 4 colors in the interior, but everything looks very well put together. It doesn't clash or it doesn't fight for attention with each other. Now, coming on to the steering wheel, also one of the best designed by Proton in my opinion, because it has this leather part where you would hold and grip. The leather is also thick, you can even press it with your fingers. And the buttons, I love the buttons because it comes as one piece. You know, the volume's up, down, and the search button for your radio station is all in one piece. So when you press it, everything moves together. It's a solid feeling. Some cars have these buttons separate. So for volume up, one button. Volume down, one button. Mute, one button. Sometimes it just goes faulty and when you press it, it goes through the steering wheel. Not too good of an experience in my opinion. This one feels very nice. And this part, the top part of the steering, the metallic finish, I like. But according to the owner, it gets a bit hot in the sun. But never mind, it looks good. And you can also find this kind of concept on the steering wheel of the Perdana V6, where it has this slightly different top-end finishing on its steering wheel. The meter cluster is one other thing that I like because it's a fully round meter cluster. The needles start at the 7 o'clock mark, which is normal in Protons, but the cluster itself is round. So it gives this very fully sporty feeling to you as you drive down the highway. Now, moving on to the center dash, it is slightly angled towards the driver, reminiscent of many BMW models in the past. Well, the Waja was touted as Asia's answer to BMW, so it had this as a starting point, I would say. As a more executive and family offering from Proton, the back seats play an important role in fulfilling this, and I'm happy to say that it doesn't disappoint. For starters, look at the back seat contours. your bottom would fall nicely into this portion here, which is, by the way, very, very nicely, thickly padded. And it is being cradled nicely on both sides. As you can see, the contours and the bolstering are thick. And also from the back, I like this kind of design because cars nowadays have more or less a flat rear bench. So when you sit, your butt would be pressing onto this side part, and give it 1 or 2 years, this part will start to sag and start to not support your butt. So having a contour where your butt would nicely fall into is a very good move. Now let's move on to the back support. The leather has a bit of a texture to it because this is the part where it most probably would rub and cause friction on your back. So this part is a bit firm and thicker. The side bolstering is also firm and supportive, and the center part, anyone sitting in the center would also not be disappointed because the center part, like most cars, is thicker than the sides. So yeah, it's quite a nice and comfy position back here. Front seat pockets, and of course there is this armrest, which is also finished in this two-tone leather that you see from the front, complete with cup holders. So yeah, all in all, the back seat of the Waja is a comfortable place to be, and the car feels compact from back here. You don't feel as if you're being thrown about when sitting because of the supports and whatnot. So all in all, it's comfy. Must I add that the inclusion of a reading light map at the back here is really reminiscent of some more luxury offerings from other brands, whereby usually the room lamp is here, but in the Waja you find it in front. And for the back seats, for a more executive feel, the map light comes from behind you as you are reading your documents and whatnot. It shines directly on them. So yeah, it's comfy back here. Alright, we are now with Abran Gomez in Bandar Sri Sendayan, Negeri Sembilan. Abran, thank you for this early morning shoot.
It's my pleasure. It's good to be here.
Well, you were at Retro Havoc till late last night. How was it?
It was definitely busy. It was a busy day. We were there from 9 a.m. till 10 to 11. And yeah, we got really busy prepping the cars, getting everything set up. Even before we dropped off the car, well, this car especially, I had a lot of things to do, like, detailing, washing, and a little bit of maintenance here and there, wiring and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I got a sufficient amount of attention. I'm quite satisfied with how things turned out, and overall I'd say it was a success.
Alright, because Retro Havoc just happened last night at the Curve, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And
yeah.
apparently many cars were there and many modified ones were there.
Yes.
But surprisingly, a stock standard C-segment sedan from 2007 had attention.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Retro Havoc a handful of times. You don't really see cars this original at Retro Havoc. They're usually modified to some extent. So I guess in a way that's what makes it stand out to some degree.
Yep. So you see, Abran is the owner of this 2007 Waja facelift, and Retro Havoc is a very good precursor to the next question. How and why this Proton Waja? Can you tell us the story behind it?
Well, this Waja was my dad's second new car, and I was there when we purchased. I was about 8 or 7 years old. I remember vividly that my parents gave me the option of choosing the color.
Choices.
And yeah, this is the color that I went for just because, it was blue. I guess as a kid, blue sort of stood out to me.
Yep.
And we've had this car for 17 years now. It's taken care of each of us in the family. It was my dad's runner for till about 2013 when he upgraded. And then it was my mom's runner until about 2019 when she got her car. And it was passed down to me eventually when I got my license. And initially it was meant to be sort of just, I didn't think too much of it. It was like a runner to me. Over time, I drove it. I drove it to Kingdom Come, and I sort of formed an attachment to it. And I mean, I feel like 17 years worth of history, it's got to mean something. And I thought I'd like to share some of that, history at Retro Havoc, in any way I could. So I tried to keep it as original as possible. Nothing's changed on this car. Every panel you see, it's all original. The only few repairs that we've had to do is probably like, stuff like the wind visors, cracked over time. It's done a lot of running, so there's a handful of things that had to be changed. This car's also been to Sabah.
Wow.
It was a runner for my dad when he was working at the naval base. Apparently, it survived a flood. I don't know how it did that, but a testament to the Waja, which, as we know, means strong as steel.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I have quite a soft spot for this car.
All right. What do you love about this car? Because as a young guy, we tend to gravitate towards sportier cars and something that does not look like a so-called uncle's car. But you found value. You saw beyond what you see in front of you. So what do you like about this car?
To be honest, I personally believe this is one of the peak points in Proton's in-house design history.
Yep.
I feel like, well, the Waja, like the first Waja, the MMC Waja, was definitely a step up from the Wiras and the Swara, which were basically just rebadged and slightly altered Mitsubishi models. But the CamPro is just, it looks like a VW Bora.
Yep.
Which I think it stands out to me. And I don't know, just something about this car, like, it just looks good to me.
Yeah,
genuinely.
it's inoffensive. It's matured and proportionate.
Yeah,
I would say.
And it's practical, comfortable. For a Proton, I mean, Lotus knocked it out of the park with the ride and handling. Like, I feel like that's something which is really underappreciated. Like, the ride and handling on these cars are surprisingly good.
And speaking of that, what is one of your most memorable drives?
Ooh, that's a tough one because we've had quite a few good drives with this car. Well, I've driven it quite a bit here and there, but I think it would have to be the one that, well, I wasn't driving per se, but I was a passenger. But this car did make its way up to Fraser's Hill, and that's probably one of my most memorable drives because it was comfortable all the way.
Comfort.
I did not expect it to be as comfortable as it was. It's got a very plush ride, and highway cruising. It's sound. It's a sound ride, honestly. Like, when I was a kid, it was really it was nice to just knock out in the back seat. And even now, I would say, like, with a bit of spirited driving, you can really bring it out. Like, it's not sporty. Like, it's not sporty in the same way as Citroen Neo is. It can handle if you really were to just bring it out. So it's a good balance, I'd say, between comfort and handling.
Nice. Tell us a bit about the restorations that you have done throughout the years. How was the car? What was the condition of the car when you first inherited it?
So when I first inherited it, the paint was a bit choppy. So the hood and the roof was faded. It's usually parked out in the sun, so I guess it's kind of expected that at some point the paint would sort of start fading.
Yep.
So, well, we initially started off with a sort of section by section repaint. So we started off with the hood and the roof, and then we moved on to the doors. But the thing with that was matching the color wasn't always accurate, and the initial shop that we took it to wasn't that great either. So eventually, last year actually, we did have it fully repainted externally. We haven't done anything internally yet, but externally it's got a full repaint. Rims have been refreshed, been powder coated, and looks a lot better than when I inherited it. Because when I inherited, it was filled with rock chips. Bless my mom, she's a very good driver. So yeah, and well, we've had to do a couple of things mechanically as well. The transmission needed a full overhaul.
I see.
So it's a lot smoother now. It's sort of how I remember it feeling. My exhaust, we did discuss this earlier, but my exhaust is not standard. Purely out of necessity, not because I feel the need for speed.
or the need for sound.
Yeah, I've got a 421 extractor and a aftermarket muffler. So it's got a nice sound, but yeah, I feel like at some point that will be swapped out for something a little bit more subtle or OEM plus. But yeah, and interior wise, we haven't really done much besides detailing. Surprisingly, the interior has held up quite well. The dashboard is still in really good condition because, to my knowledge, the dashboards for these Wajas tend to sort of crack over time with exposed heat.
I see.
So yeah, I mean, surprisingly, it's held up quite well. Seats do need a bit of reupholstering, which we'll get to that in the future. Headliners, it's come off its clip a little bit, so that'll be addressed in the future. But yeah, other than that, I'd say most of the cars held up pretty well.
What about the suspension system or the bushings and whatnot?
Yeah, okay, so those did need actually changing. Last year we did swap it out for, it's not standard as well, that's also aftermarket. So we've gone for, I believe it was KYB for our shocks. And the springs, I'm running F-tuned comfort lowering springs.
Ah, CLS.
Yeah, that's the one. So it does give it a lower ride height. Previously, I sort of felt that it was maybe a bit too tall. So this sort of has a nicer stance to it now.
In terms of sourcing of spare parts,
Oh,
how has the experience been? Because this facelift was sold for a short bit of time before the CPS came in.
yeah, it's not been easy. I've still yet to find emblems, the emblems for the rear. So anybody out there, if you've got emblems for the CamPro Waja, please give me a shout. I'm at my wit's end. I give up. I don't know what to do.
It's the CamPro 1.6E emblem.
That's the one, yeah.
And the WAJA letterings.
Yep.
Okay.
Surprisingly, really difficult to find. Without just changing the entire rear garnish, which, I mean, why do that when I can just get the badge? So
Yeah.
But yeah, apart from that, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's not that difficult at the same time. Like some things and stuff. I mean, like stuff like the wing mirrors, like stuff which are parts which are shared by like other Proton models, like the wing mirror. The rear view mirrors and whatnot. Those are pretty easy to find if you get like OEM parts. Door visors. I was lucky enough to find an original set on Shopee, so I'd say it's sort of not too bad, but it's not that easy either.
You've had this car since 2018, right?
Yeah, I've been driving it since 2018.
Okay, and the restoration process started back then,
Pretty much.
2018.
Yeah.
So this is where we are at till today. There is a common sentiment, or perhaps through actual experience, that owners say that the Waja is quite difficult to maintain and parts fail prematurely. How has your experience been?
Well, I mean, a lot of what's been said is definitely true. The most common thing would be the power windows and the taillights.
Taillights?
Yeah,
I
so
see.
the taillights do have a tendency of having water leak in. So I believe that was changed like very long ago. So they still held up. We did, however, have to actually swap out my right taillight because a poorly done mod sort of melted the housing. So we had to swap it out anyway. So that's the only thing. Power windows, yeah, well, we're still sort of working on it. I've managed to restore the driver's side and the two rear windows.
Mm-hmm.
We swapped out the original plastic assembly for a new metal one, which is a lot sturdier. For some reason, they used plastic assemblies. I don't know why.
Beats me.
Given Malaysia's, climate,
Yes.
you'd think that they want to go for something which is a little sturdier in heat. So.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, apart from that, pretty sound for the most part. I mean, a few mechanical mishaps here and there. Like at present, I still have a few unaddressed issues, like my handbrake and traction control light. The indicator still is like permanently on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a wiring issue, like a fuse issue or something. I'm not too sure. We did have a couple of issues. Well, these are like issues that just recently popped up. Like the starter motor was sparking. I did mention earlier, like we had to change out the exhaust because the extractor had a hole in it for some reason. I don't know how, but we couldn't find an original, so we just went for something out of the market. Oh yeah, the other thing, radiator. So like the cooling system for this car, or I wouldn't say for all Wajas, but in my experience, has not been that sound. So I think in the 17 years that we've had it, it's probably had the cooling system redone maybe about 3 or 4 times. Like we broke down McDonald's drive-thru once. That was fun. But yeah, and apart from that, I'd say no other mechanical issues.
Mm-hmm. These cars are pretty much reliable on its own because you still see a lot of them running.
Yeah,
Especially in Klang, where most of
taxis,
us are
police cars.
Yes.
I mean, I call this the Malaysian Ford Crown Victoria.
Unkillable.
Yeah, literally. You see these everywhere. Taxis, police cars.
Yes.
It's definitely an icon to some extent. The Malaysian workhorse.
Yes. And especially in this 2007 facelift model, I rarely see them. Once in a while, I'll see them in that very bright red color or that burgundy color, and that's about it.
And I mean, in my experience, I've rarely ever seen one not modified. You do like the ones that aren't modified tend to be, well, you definitely can see that it's seen some mileage in its life.
Tell us a bit about perhaps the communities, the car guy communities or drive communities that you are in right now.
I did display this car under MDG and Zenith. So, I'm quite surprised with the way this car is received, to be honest, because I sort of expected it to be sort of glossed over as just another sort of economy box. But no, people seem to appreciate it. I'm quite touched by that. Like, it's nice to see that there is still appreciation for what I would consider the golden age of Proton back in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, when they did have like a foreign market as well, like the UK, Australia.
Yep.
And yeah, well, I'm happy to be one of the few that actually is making an effort to preserve that era of Proton.
Yes, because as you said, it was the golden era, and there were a lot of growing pains during that decade. It's teenage years, so to speak, kind of rebellious. I mean, you can see the rebellion, daring to be different.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely tried their best to stand out, I'd say. Yeah, there were definitely a few bumps along the way.
Yep.
But I'd say Proton was definitely at its peak in like the 2010s. I do very much like modern Proton as well, like the Iris, the Saga. They're sound cars. They're great value for money and, great economy cars. There's also, not to mention, the X50, the X70, and the S90. But, I mean, it's no secret that the X50 and those cars aren't original Proton designs. And while they are good cars, no doubt about it, they are very good cars. It just doesn't have the same sort of spirit as something that was designed in-house. And I think that's just like Proton R&D at its peak.
Yes. Well, business priorities change over the years, to follow market trends. So here we are right now. But back in 2007, well, we did everything on our own. And this is one of the fruits of our labor still standing today. So anyhow, it's been 17 years and Proton now is also in a different era. And you are still soldiering on with such a nice, pristine car. What keeps you going?
I'd say the memories of my childhood in this car. It's just, I'm way too attached to it. I hope to keep it running for another 17 years and another 17 after that. It's just the sentimental value. It's just too much sentimental value with this car, and it's just I do genuinely love this car.
Well, that is also a sentiment that I'm sure all of you share as well, where cars are not just machines to get from point A to B, but a living memory of our lives, and emotional journey, a soul attached to it. So, Abram, what are your future plans for this Waja? What do you have in mind?
There's a lot of things going through my head with that, but I've sort of settled on just keeping it as original as possible externally. Maybe a few sort of quality of life improvements, like maybe a new audio system, but nothing that sort of has it straying away from like the original aesthetic. Maybe mechanically a few sort of changes here and there.
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, I plan to just preserve it in the way it is right now. A sort of time capsule in not just Proton's history, but Malaysia's automotive industry.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you are now looking at a 2007 Proton Waja facelift, a short bit of time being sold in Proton's history, but a very rare car nonetheless. Abram, thank you so much for your time.
My absolute pleasure.
It's been very nice talking to you and seeing this pristine car. As always, it's all about the car and the owner on Traction Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, a 2007 Proton Waja CamPro facelift. A local engine, a timeless design, comfort, great handling, and all-around practicality, I would say that the Proton Waja CamPro facelift is Proton's modern classic. Thank you, Abram, for spending your time with us, and we'll see you in the next video.